very much support the work that UNRWA does. We think it's critical. There is no other humanitarian player in Gaza who can provide food and water and medicine at the scale that UNRWA does. We want to see that work continued, which is why it is so important that the United Nations take this matter seriously, that they investigate it, that there is accountability for anyone who is found to have engaged in wrongdoing, and that they take whatever other measures are appropriate to ensure that this sort of thing cannot happen again.
Boost for Hamas military activity and relying on Hamas for aid distribution in the Gaza Strip. It has been compromised in a way that makes it not only a tool of Palestinian terrorism against Israel, but also an ineffective mechanism of distributing aid to civilians in Gaza. In light of this systemic rot, UNRWA simply cannot be relied upon to investigate or reform itself. It is not a neutral organization. It has been hijacked by Hamas.
Welcome back to GVS Dialogue with Najma Minhas. Today I want to do a deep dive into why Israel has asked for UNRWA to be defunded and why the very existence of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees, known as UNRWA, threatens the Israeli state. Less than 24 hours after the ICJ decision on the provisional measures on the South Africa versus Israel case on genocide, in which the ICJ ruled that a potential case of genocide against the Palestinians existed and ordered Israel to ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches the Palestinian people, the Israeli intelligence services changed the media's attention from this bombshell towards a claim that 12 of the Hamas attackers on October the 7th worked for UNRWA. They had got this information from the Palestinian fighters captured that day.
The reports that we got last week, and UNRWA brought them to us, were deeply, deeply troubling.
Antony Blinken says it's credible, so we'll take it as credible for the moment. Israel swiftly called for UNRWA to be defunded by the international community, and within hours was supported by the United States, UK, Germany, Finland, and many other countries over the last couple of days, including the EU. Very disappointingly, I have to say. This is despite instantaneous action, which was taken by UNRWA within hours of finding out about this, firing the men. The cruelty and the baseness of that whole of the Western world, who within few exceptions decided collectively to punish the 2 million Palestinians, is staring us in the face. Who is UNRWA, and why is Israel asking for the defunding of an organization for which over 13,000 people work to ensure essential humanitarian aid reaches Palestinians in need, and out of which 0.001%, i.e. 12 people, a minuscule fraction, I would say, were asked to have been involved in the October the 7th terror attacks. I want to give just a short background on UNRWA, who it is, why it is, where does it come from, so that you understand the bigger picture. So UNRWA was created in 1949 following the 1948 Arab-Israeli conflict, which Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, after which many Palestinians became refugees. They lost their lands, their villages were overtaken into what became the State of Israel. UNRWA's initial mandate was to provide relief to the 700,000 Palestinians at that time who lost these homes and their livelihoods as a result of this conflict. It plays a crucial role in the lives of the refugees. It played in 1948 and is still doing that today. And it's not just about providing basic needs like food, shelter. It's also about education, healthcare, social services. For many Palestinians, UNRWA schools and health clinics are crucial lifelines.
الأنوروا شريان الحياة عنا. الأنوروا هي طب مين بده يطعمينا مين بده يشربنا بعد الحرب وبعد يعني. والله يكون معي للناس.
حزنا علينا لا عرب ولا غرب ولا أي بني آدم. وفي نفس الوقت وفوق الكارثة وفوق التجويع اللي إحنا فيه برضه بيعملوا علينا قطع المساعدات للاجئين. بعرف بأيدا.
The agency operates in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and has over 700 schools, 140 healthcare facilities, and gives out food and cash assistance to over 1.8 million Palestinians. Since October 2023, during the bombing of Gaza by Israel, the agency is the sole lifeline for Palestinians once again, many who would have died by now if it was not for the food and shelter that UNRWA was providing. Over 1 million Palestinians who've been displaced from their homes due to the Israeli bombing are currently sheltering in UNRWA schools and other facilities. Over 150 of the agency's own employees have been killed in this conflict since October. However, this contentious relationship between UNRWA and Israel goes back decades. And before I go into why that is, a small detour. So many of us have heard about the UNHCR, especially those living in Pakistan, Afghanistan, South Asia. We know about the amazing work that is done with the Afghan refugees for decades. UNHCR looks after refugees globally. So you might be wondering, why is there a separate agency, UNRWA, which just looks after Palestinian refugees? Well, this has been explained really well by Jonathan Cook, who I recommend you follow on Twitter. But to go back in 1948, Israel wanted a separate agency to be set up for the Palestinian refugees. And the reason is that the precursor, the institution before the UNHCR, used to be called the International Refugee Organization, and it was established during World War II to take care of the Jewish refugees from Europe. And its mandate was to find homes for these Jews being kicked out of Europe. So how could Israel ask for the International Refugee Organization to send Jews to those same lands and from which it was kicking the Palestinians out of? Hence, UNRWA came into being. Now let's come back to why Israelis hate UNRWA and the UN system in general. The UN and UNRWA, as the agency underneath it, is by its very nature of who it is, what it can highlight, how it can highlight what is happening in the region, often puts up a mirror to the nature of Israeli actions on international fora. In fact, much of the work and much of the evidence that was cited by the ICJ, especially with regard to humanitarian issues, in its recent ruling, when discussing the harsh conditions on ground for the Palestinians, came from UNRWA.
The court considers that, with regard to the present situation, Israel must, in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention.
So you destroy UNRWA's credibility and you put the UN on the back foot, you weaken the ICJ's case. And then you have the right-wing Israelis who want to settle in all of the Palestinian lands. They hate UNRWA because it's created a lifeline for the Palestinians, however basic it may be. It's set up and maintained an infrastructure within Gaza and West Bank, roads, schools, hospitals, and even given jobs to Palestinians that has allowed Palestinians to continue living in those lands for decades. Right-wing settlers would have loved to have created a situation so bad for the Palestinians that they all ran away to other Arab countries and left the land empty for them to take over.
אתם יודעים מה התשובה. בלי התיישבות אין ביטחון. שבריחה מביאה מלחמה. ושאם רוצים שלא יהיה עוד פעם 7/10, צריך לחזור הביתה.
As even expressed recently by Netanyahu's chant from the river to the sea under Israeli sovereignty. Social media and some Israeli TV channels already show trucks and cars lined up outside Gaza, ready to move in and take over as soon as the massive Israeli firepower destroys everything on the ground and the Palestinians flee away from their homes.
Assembly is to bring together the people who claim that we have to return to the Gaza Strip and establish Jewish communities right away.
But leaving these extremists aside, there are really two things about UNRWA which has made it a thorn in Israel's side for decades. The first is a key element of UNRWA's mandate, which is the right of return. UNRWA was set up to help all Palestinians displaced in 1948, as well as all the descendants of the Palestinian male refugees, to theoretically have the right to return back to their properties. Israelis vehemently oppose this concept of the Palestinian right of return.
UNRWA is an organization that perpetuates the Palestinian refugee problem. It also perpetuates the right of return for Palestinian refugees narrative in order to eliminate the state of Israel. Therefore, UNRWA must become a thing of the past.
The second thing which drives Israel crazy is the demographic concern. Because UNRWA allows second, third, and so on each generation to register as a Palestinian refugee, Israel claims that this is perpetuating the Palestinian refugee issue. And furthermore, with each generation, the number of Palestinians increase, which alarms Israelis, as Jews may be outnumbered in their own state, which was set up as a safety for them. So they're happy when the international community spends millions of dollars to clear up the mess it's made in that area. The UNHCR can come and take over the job of UNRWA, but what they don't want is the agency to act in ways that allows Palestinians to think that they have the right to return to those lands of their descendants. And that is why they say that UNRWA is not helping to create peace in the region. And that is why, even before the allegations of the Hamas attackers working for UNRWA were made, the Israeli Foreign Minister, Israeli Katz, had already said that it would stop the UN agency from operating in the post-war Gaza, saying that it will not be part of the day after. So the very essence, the very fabric of who UNRWA is and why it was set up threatens this right-wing government running Israel. UNRWA is that unsaid third player in this intertwined story of Palestine and Israel going back to 1948. So UNRWA is always kept under pressure, since the majority of its funds come from voluntary contributions from the international community, of which the United States has traditionally been the largest contributor. In 2018, Donald Trump also stopped $320 million of funding that it used to give to UNRWA after a request from Israel. And the State Department at that time called the institution irredeemably flawed. And it was only after the Biden administration that the funds were restarted in 2021. But coming back to the current situation in Gaza, over 500,000 Palestinians are said to be what is defined as catastrophically hungry, and they're on a high risk of mass starvation if they're not helped immediately. UNRWA's funding, if it's not replenished, is expected to last only till the end of February. Not funding UNRWA is tantamount to collective punishment once again of the Palestinians by the Western world. After the ICJ provisional relief order on ensuring that humanitarian assistance reaches the Palestinians, its role has become even more crucial, given how Israel has to report back in 1 month to the ICJ on this measure. It is not clear how it intends to do that. How does it intend to get a check mark on this requirement without UNRWA's blessing? Or maybe this is how it intends to get it. Is it going to show UNRWA what it can do if it doesn't play ball? The UK and Europe need to review its recent suspension of aid and ensure that they stand on the right side of history. For the United States, I have little hope, given, as I said in an earlier vlog, that it has this strange, self-abusive relationship with Israel that I don't understand. But under the 1948 Genocide Convention, they have the legal obligation to ensure that a genocide does not occur with their support. And as the ICJ has pointed out, stopping food and assistance to the Palestinians would constitute a genocide in making. So what's the way forward for UNRWA? The agency's mandate is renewed every few years by the United Nations General Assembly. But the bigger question is about finding a lasting solution for the Palestinian statehood. And given the work UNRWA is doing to help and sustain Palestinians in the short run, I would urge people to support UNRWA with donations. I will put a link in the description with some details. Thank you so much for joining me today on this deep dive into UNRWA and its impact on the Palestinian refugees. Remember, understanding these issues is the very first step towards finding a sustainable solution. And I'd like to request that if you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this.